Hi everyone, it's science time. Our topic is evolution and inheritance. Last week you looked at some vocabulary needed to understand this topic a bit more. So we're going to play a little bit of vocabulary bingo to embed those words and definitions. You need to choose 6 of the 10 words that you were introduced to last week. Pause the video now and write 6 of these words down. Okay, you should have 6 words written down. I am going to read aloud a definition, and if you have the word that I am saying, then you will need to cross it off and we'll see who gets bingo first. Right, word 1. The action or process of adapting to a specific environment. The word is adaptation. Definition 2. The surroundings or conditions in which a person, animal or plant lives or operates. The word is environments. Definition 3. A group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals who are capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. The word is species. Definition 4. A unit that is inherited, which is transferred from a parent to offspring and is held to determine some characteristics of the offspring. The word is genes. Definition 5. The young born of living organisms produced either by a single organism or, in the case of sexual reproduction, 2 organisms. The word is offspring. Definition 6. A person who studies the science of life. The word is paleontologist. Definition 7. A feature or quality belonging typically to a person, place or thing and serving to identify them. The word is characteristics. Definition 8. The process by which different kinds of organisms are believed to have developed from earlier forms during the history of Earth. The word is evolution. Definition 9. A stock of animals or plants within a species that have a distinctive appearance and typically have been developed by deliberate selection. The word is breeds. And finally, the state or fact of continuing to live or exist, typically in spite of an accident, ordeal, or difficult circumstance. The word is survival. Well done for playing along. Now let's start the lesson. Our learning objective is to explain the concept of inheritance and how it enables evolution to take place. Evolution is a scientific theory. A theory is an idea that is backed up with research. That all of the living things that have ever lived, living now, and will ever live are all developed from an earlier living being. So the theory of evolution states that we didn't just click our fingers one day and change, but that everything could be tracked back over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, if not longer, to one single thing that over time changed in various ways. Not that this change was instant, and through this topic you'll understand what I mean when I say changed over time, so that then we are the people that we are today. So that things changed in such different ways. Imagine it a bit like a tree. It starts off as one and then it branches off in so many different ways that there's so much variation now. Scientists have performed many experiments and have examined huge amounts of evidence to come as close to proving that evolution is the answer to how life has changed and developed. One of the strongest forms of evidence for evolution comes from fossils. So fossils are the remains of living things that have been preserved in the ground or underwater. So you know that that's how we know that dinosaurs existed, because they found fossilized bones and other fossilized evidence such as footprints, things like that. Fossils show that many species that once existed were quite different from those that are alive today. So dinosaurs are an example of this. We no longer have any creature living on Earth that is the same in some way as a dinosaur. The closest things that we might have are things like birds, because we know that pterosaurs were those winged, feathered animals, and that's the closest that we've got now. But that doesn't mean that they are dinosaurs, okay? It just means that evolution has occurred over time. Did you know fossilized bones of horses from more than 50 million years ago show that horses alive then were around the same size as a dog would be today? So picture that in your head. 50 million years ago, there was something that's very similar to what we see as a horse today, but the horses then were very, very small. Now, as time went by, fossils were found from not 50 million years ago, maybe 30 million years ago, maybe then 10 million years ago, and these bones showed that these horses had got bigger over time. So it's not the same horse that got bigger, obviously, but that species over time, through having more and more offspring, the offspring became bigger and bigger and bigger. So what is the explanation for this? Pause the video and think of it, and then press play when you'd like to know. So our explanation. So over time, the larger horses were recognised as being stronger, and therefore they were more efficient in helping with the human workload. The strongest horses were then bred together to create strong offspring. The weaker and smaller horses were not desirable. No one wanted them, so they were less likely to be mated. They were less likely to be bred. So the people in charge of making sure that the horses bred would keep the poor, weaker horses away so that they never passed on their genes. Therefore, their genes didn't get carried on. So all of the small horses didn't pass on the small gene. Over time, there were fewer and fewer small horses until eventually none were left. So if a process is created, if evolution like that is created through human interaction, and humans have kind of led it down that path, it's called selective breeding, and that's very much responsible for how you get so many different breeds of dogs now. But another way of thinking about it is, before humans intervened, if you think of larger horses versus smaller horses, the ones that were stronger would have been the larger ones, and therefore they would have been more likely to be able to fight off disease and illness. So the smaller horses may have died a lot quicker. This meant that the lives of the larger horses was longer, and therefore they would have more chance of reproducing and passing on the genes. Now that, when it is not encouraged by human interaction and it is just the way of nature and disease taking its course, is called natural selection. Both of those are parts of the evolution process. So we've discovered that very strong evidence for evolution comes from the study of fossils, but it also comes from the study of DNA. And I know that you will have heard that word before. So, recap, we know that our bodies are made up of trillions of cells. So you can see there are two cells at the top. There's an animal cell and there's a plant cell. There are some similarities between both, but we're talking about, for evolution purposes in humans and animals, animal cells, evolution of plants, plant cells. Now, every cell, whether it's animal or plant, has a nucleus. The nucleus is like the brain of the cell. Think of like a computer. It's like the big, oh gosh, I don't know computer terms properly, but that big processing chip where everything is stored. It's the main part, basically, of the cell where all the information is stored. Now, inside of that nucleus are 46 chromosomes. Now, chromosomes are like these little information pods. Now, chromosomes are attached together in pairs. So, if there are 46 chromosomes, you would end up with 23 pairs. So, inside of these chromosomes is our DNA. So this is what chromosomes look like. And if you unraveled them and you microscopically went closer, you'd see these chains of DNA. Now, DNA is like your own personal code. It is unique to you and you alone. Nobody else has the same DNA code as you. No one, okay? So genes are the short sections of DNA. If you were able to look even closer, microscopically at DNA, you would then see that it's then organised in little sections, and these little short sections are your genes. And these contain specific parts of your code. So when they're all put together to make DNA, it's your whole code. But if you just wanted to focus in on a tiny bit of code, such as your eye colour, there'd be a specific gene for that. So not only do they determine your eye colour, they determine your skin colour, your hair colour, they can determine whether you have freckles, whether or not you've got a big or a small nose, straight or curly hair. They also determine really strange things, actually, like whether or not you can fold your tongue over, or whether or not your earlobes are attached to your skin, or whether they kind of hang off. There are loads of different things that genes are responsible for in our makeup. So take a look at this here. You're going to have a task that's linked to these images, and the instructions are all on your sheet. So I'll read this aloud, and I'd like you to pause the video and have a go at the first task that relates to this set of images. So there are 100 trillion cells in the human body. Inside each human cell is a nucleus. Now, red blood cells don't have nucleuses. Or nuclei is probably the correct term. Each nucleus contains 46 chromosomes, and they are arranged in 23 pairs. One chromosome in every pair comes from each parent. Now, they're not really pink and blue. They're just using that to show that the pink ones would come from your mum and the blue ones would come from your dad. So the chromosomes, when you zoom in even further, contain coiled strands of DNA. And then when you go closer, the genes are the sections of the DNA that contain the code for making the proteins, our building blocks of life. Those codes that are responsible for things like our hair colour and our eye colour. So pause the video now to complete task 1. Press play when you're ready to move on. You receive your genes from your parents, and this is the concept of inheritance. So inheritance, we can use it in two terms. It could be that, unfortunately, we know that when people die, it's very sad, and sometimes they leave a will and they pass some things on. So that's inheritance in the term of in bereavement, but inheritance happens to all of us as soon as we are created inside of our mother's womb. We are given genes from our dad, and we are given genes from our mother, our mum. So this, we inherit parts of them. So in science, it is the genes that are passed on from parents to their offspring. So we're going to just have a really quick look. Now this one's really basic, really easy. But because we know about genes being passed on, this is how even toddlers and young babies can do this next task. Look at the pictures and match the parent to their offspring. So, ridiculously easy, yeah? Why was it so easy? It was so easy because the reality of the situation is that a parent passes on this DNA and it makes the offspring look like the parent. So we know that owls are going to have a baby, have offspring that looks just the same as them, miniature versions of them. So this is why this task was so easy, and this is why even babies can do it. So remember we talked about chromosomes before. So they're found in every single cell in the body in these pairs, but not in the reproductive cells. So let's talk about that because that's important. So we know that for males, their reproductive cells are called sperm, and for females, their reproductive cells are called eggs. If you're having a little snigger at home, then pause the video now. But this is science. This is how reproduction happens, guys. In each of the cells, there's a nucleus. Now, in all of the other cells, the nucleus contains 46 chromosomes. But these reproductive cells are designed to join up at some point, aren't they? That's the point of reproduction, is the male cell and the female cell, the sperm and the egg, joining together to form one. So they only contain 23 chromosomes. So they only have half of the parent's genetic code. So when reproduction occurs, the 23 chromosomes from the female in the egg and the 23 chromosomes from the male in the sperm join together and then make a brand new code. Finally, there are 46 chromosomes and they get to pair up, with each pair being one part of the male DNA and one part of the female DNA. And it makes this brand new code. So that is how you came to be who you are. So in our illustration here, we have a male, and a male's DNA we're going to say is made up of XY chromosomes, and a female's DNA is made up of XX chromosomes. So in this example, the male gives half of what he has in his sperm cell. So that sperm cell's taken the X chromosome. The female has given one of the X's in her egg, and when they come together, they make this new code of XX. It's a very, very simplified way of looking at it. Create a brand new code with 46 chromosomes, okay? So this is how our characteristics are passed on. We're going to look at the following images. I'm going to write down all of the characteristics that have been passed on from the parent to their offspring. So this is our guided practice. You can see, you'll know who these are. It's Victoria and David Beckham, and that's their 3 boys. So have a look at Victoria and David Beckham. Now, their children are wonderful creations of both of them. You can look at their children and you can see that each of them have got something from their dad and something from their mum. So have a little look and see what you think has been passed on. Don't spend too long on this because this is just guided practice before we go to independent. Right, pause the video and have a think and then press play and I'll talk you through it. Okay, right, let's have a little look now. So, things that we know here is that David Beckham has this very kind of thick, wide hairline. Can you see? I'll draw it on. It kind of goes out and then in. And if then you look at this child, he's got exactly the same hairline. So, David Beckham has passed this on to this son here. Now, also, what we can see is that David Beckham has a very kind of pointed nose. Victoria Beckham has more of an upturned nose. And if we look at their children, we've got a pointed nose here from dad, and then the upturned nose here from mum. Now, all of them tend to have, David Beckham's got this like kind of like thinner eyes, and they've all got those eyes, but Victoria Beckham has the very brown eyes. So they've inherited the shape of their eyes from their dad, but they've inherited the colour of their eyes from their mum. And even looking down to kind of the shape of their eyebrows is very much like David Beckham, so kind of very long and flat eyebrows as well. Large lips, both parents have large lips, so both children have got large lips as well. Victoria Beckham has a very kind of pointed chin, and all of her children have inherited that from her. In terms of other things that I can kind of see here is that kind of the length of their faces. They're both got quite long faces. All the children have inherited that too. You can look at the fact that maybe this child, if you look at his ear, it kind of dips in the middle here. David Beckham also has that too. So that's how inheritance works. You can kind of pick features that you've got. Now, if you compare what you look like to your mum and your dad, then you might be able to say, oh, I have the same eyes as my mum, but I have the same nose as my dad. And it gets really quite interesting. And even with grandparents, it works too, because remember, your mums and dads inherited their DNA from your grandparents. So you might actually have a lot of things that your grandparents have. So next time you see your mum, your dad, or a grandparent, take a look at their faces and see what's similar with yours. Now, your task is to take a look at these two pictures here. You've got these on your sheets, and I'd like you to have a look through at all of the things that you can see that the child has inherited from their parent. So we've got female, female here, and male, male there. You may recognise these two people. They're both very famous. Okay, so pause the screen now so you can see the pictures, and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay, moving on. Misconception alert. Females do not just inherit genes from their mothers, and males do not just inherit genes from their fathers. So in this picture, we've got Will Smith again. In the last picture, you saw him with his son, and you could tell that his son looked so much like him. But actually, now that you're looking at the picture of him with his daughter looks more like him than his son does. So remember that it isn't that you can only get things from your dad if you're a boy, and you can only get things from your mum if you're a girl. It's that inheritance works anyway. If you're a girl, you can still look like your dad. If you're a boy, you can still look like your mum. So, if parents always give away 23 chromosomes each and they create offspring, why isn't it that their offspring are identical? So if a parent has 4 children and every time they give away 23 chromosomes, why don't you have 4 children that look exactly the same, is the question. So, the genes passed on are half of the parent's genetic code. So this means, imagine putting all of those different traits, imagine a bag full of marbles. And in those marbles, there are 46 little things to represent each chromosome. Now, that's obviously, it goes way further than that because there's all the DNA. So imagine then that we're just going on this premise, there are 46 marbles inside of a bag, and you've only allowed to give away 23. Now, if you dipped your hand in there on a Monday and pulled 23 out, and then the next day, on a Tuesday, you did it all again, you wouldn't end up pulling out the exact same 23 chromosomes on a Tuesday that you got on a Monday. So that's how the variation occurs. That's how the differences occurred. Now, even identical twins that both get the same 23 chromosomes end up being different, because when we're talking about identical twins that are coming from the same egg and sperm at the beginning, the egg and sperm kind of duplicates into two and then develops in its own ways inside of the womb. So they still can be different even when they're identical. Their code is still not completely the same. Right then, so you're going to have a look at two dogs. This is another task. Now, if these two dogs produced offspring, I want you to write down all of the characteristics that the offspring could inherit. So let's have a little look. So here are my two dogs, and these two dogs are going to be crossbred to produce some offspring. So you're going to think of all of the different things that might happen in terms of what their offspring would look like. So let me do the first for you. So having a look at this gorgeous little Pomeranian with very, very tiny ears. Now, I could say that the offspring would have tiny ears, which is one thing that I've taken from the Pomeranian, but might be a very large dog when I'm looking at the height of this one. So they might inherit tiny ears from the Pomeranian. Now when it comes to the Husky, they inherit large pointed ears. These aren't pointed, these are very kind of curved ears. So when it comes to the Pomeranian, it is small curved ears, and when it comes to the Husky, it is large pointed ears. So pause the video now and think of lots of different things that the Pomeranian would give away and that the Husky would give away, and press play when you are ready to start. Okay, so just out of interest, here you go. This is what I'm going to actually show you what a Pomeranian bred with a Husky looks like. Here it is. It's called a Pomsky. What a cute little thing, a Pomsky. So you can see that in this case, it's got the curved ears, but they are still large as well. It's got the snout, the long snout of the Husky. It's got this fluffy tail, this fluffy curved tail here that the Pomeranian had, and it's got the short legs of the Pomeranian, but it's still got the colouring of the Husky. It looks very much like a very miniature but very, very fluffy Husky, and it gets that fluffiness from the Pomeranian. So you can see where it's inherited lots of these different traits. Remember that things like the nature of the dog can be inherited as well. So if you've got an aggressive dog, that can be passed down. If you've got a timid dog, that can be passed down. Very shy dog, that can be passed down as well.